So test is a week from this Thursday, May 11th. And then the rest of the semester, what we have is we'll have a cumulative exam which will make up half of your final grade. I believe your final was 15%. The other half will be based on a project. And more to come regarding that in the upcoming weeks. So today we're going to focus on reviewing for the AP exam by talking generally what the test is about and specifically, some of the things for Unit 7 to help those of you who missed the test last week from Unit 7 to review for that, because tomorrow in class you'll be making up the Unit 7 test. And then the Unit 6 and 5 AP review packets that I'm going to give you later today, those are due Friday. You'll have a work day on those tomorrow if you already took the test. Any questions on the plan? All right, so let's first talk about the test in general, what it looks like. At the end, you'll get a score of either 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. Most colleges accept a 3 or higher for credit. And there are 4 main categories that you're testing on: exploring data, sampling and experimentation, so how to plan and conduct a study, anticipating patterns, so that'd be probability. Basically, those first 3 we worked on semester 1. And the 4th one is statistical inference, doing the hypothesis test and confidence intervals. So the way it breaks down, where is it? Here we go. So exploratory analysis, looking at distributions of data, describing data, that sort of thing, that's about 20 to 30% of the exam. So that was a lot of Unit 1, a little bit of Unit 2. Planning and conducting a study, that was mainly Unit 3, so how you gather data with experiments or observational studies, simulations, random selection, that's 10 to 15% of the exam. Probability, which is always a tougher one, that's 20 to 30% of the exam. That was like Unit 4 from semester 1. We're going to spend a couple of days this week working on just probability again. And then the biggest chunk, 30 to 40%, is statistical inference, which is what we've done all semester with hypothesis test and confidence intervals. Okay, and I've given you this topic outline here. This is also available if you search it on the the internet. The College Board gives you this, and it shows in detail all the things that you should be able to do in more detail on those areas. So like if we look at statistical inference, can you estimate population parameters and margin of errors? Point estimators, including unbiasedness and variability, the logic of confidence intervals, confidence intervals for means, difference of means, confidence interval for the slope, general testing significance, so hypothesis test for proportions, difference of 2 proportions, mean, difference of 2 means, paired and unpaired, chi-squared goodness of fit, homogeneity of proportions and independence, and slope of the least squares regression line. So for B numbers 6 and 7, that was Unit 7, and for A number 8 was Unit 7. You can use your graphing calculator. This formula sheet. All right, so here's the question number 2 from last year's AP exam. And if you didn't get the right inference procedure, you're going to be in rough shape on the whole thing. So make sure you really know how to do that. Looks like you have some quantitative or categorical variable here. These are counts of people. And we're testing to see if there's an association. So that should scream out to you, chi-squared test for independence. So that's what part A is all about. Here's the answer key. It talks about the intent of the question. The intent of the question is just, can you conduct a hypothesis test? So for part A, These are what they're looking for in the answer key. Do you have a correct pair of hypotheses? Null, that the proportion of children who chose each snack is the same regardless of which type of ad is viewed. Alternative, the proportion is different between those, depending on which type of ad they viewed. So then you need a step 2. Identify a correct test procedure by name or formula and check the appropriate conditions. So you should either show your chi-squared formula here, or what I would recommend is just say, I'm going to do a chi-squared test for, well, actually this is a homogeneity. I'm sorry, they're doing homogeneity. This is not independence. So if you did a test for independence, it's pretty much the same mechanics. The wording here would just be different in the hypotheses, and you might get nicked off a little for that. We'll look at the scoring guideline. So chi-squared test for homogeneity. So then you have to show your conditions. So it says they were randomly assigned to groups. So there's the randomization. The 10% doesn't really apply because it was a random allocation. And the expected counts are at least 5. You have to show the expected counts. They're in parentheses here. If you type this in a calculator as a matrix, the 21, 13, 22, 4, 12, 3, and do the chi-squared test, it will give you the expected matrix. Okay? So then step 3 is to calculate the appropriate test statistic and the p-value. So now they showed the work, but really, as you'll see in the scoring guideline, you don't need to show all the work. You basically just need the chi-square value of 10.291, and you do need this to show how you found the p-value. The p-value is the probability of getting a chi-squared with 2 degrees of freedom greater than or equal to 10.29, which is about 0.006. And then the conclusion in correct context of the study using the result of the test. So because p is small, for instance, much smaller than alpha equals 0.05, we reject the null at the 0.05 level and also at the 0.01 level if we had used that, which means there is evidence that the proportions who would choose each snack differ based on which ad is viewed. So in other words, the commercial kind of worked. So let's look at how they scored this now. Okay, so this question is scored in steps 1 and 2 are in part A. So let's see, section 1. So E is essentially correct if both hypotheses are stated correctly with at least one in context. So they have to be in context. Talk about the ads differing. Okay? Part 2, you had to identify the correct test procedure by name or by formula. And part 3, the technical conditions are all checked, all expected counts greater than or equal to 5, and the randomization. So you had to have all 3 of those to get an E. Okay? It says if you used independence instead of that, they did give you credit. So if you did a test for independence, you still could get full credit here. Okay? If you had, if you had all 3 of those components, you got an E. If you had 2 of the 3, you got a P. If you only had 1 of those 3 components, you didn't get anything. And then you looked at the chi-squared component. You had to have the correct statistic, you had to have the correct degrees of freedom, and the correct p-value. Notice it does not say anything about work. You don't have to show all your work on that. If you do, be very careful and make sure you show the correct thing. And then the conclusion. You had to provide a conclusion in context, providing a linkage between the alpha level and the p-value. That p is lower than alpha. Okay? We'll hit that a little more Wednesday. Let me shut this down first.
I'm just gonna come in at EOT and talk to you. Is that okay?
Oh, okay.